Hi, how are y'all doing today? My name is Byron Walker. I'm the facilities director here at the Polasek Museum and Sculpture Gardens in Winter Park, Florida. And I have a guest here that we wanted to invite over this morning and get a little bit of recorded memory from this individual. I've known him since I was in high school, and his name is Glen Bischoff. And he's kind of been a pillar in the art community here in Central Florida for a very long time and impacted many lives through his knowledge and skills and patience that he so freely gave all of us students while we had him in high school. Mr. Bischoff, a little background, he came to Orlando in the mid-50s and started in the school system here at OCPS. And was at Cherokee Junior High then, and then he moved on to Edgewater High School. He was also the very first art director at Channel 24 here, the public TV station. And at one point in his life, he had the opportunity to meet Albin Polasek. And the whole goal of today's interview is to trigger some memories and good thoughts and get a live story here from Mr. Bischoff on his memory of Mr. Polasek. And this is Glen Bischoff. Glad you're here today, Mr. Bischoff.
Thank you, Byron. You covered my whole life and the experiences that I had. I know this is about Albin Polasek, not about me. And you mentioned that I was teaching at the Orlando Art Museum, and I was teaching 2 adult classes a week after having taught the kids on Saturdays beforehand. And I was in the very first Sidewalk Arts Festival in Winter Park, back when it was for local artists. I remember I reserved a space for myself and one for my students to show the artwork that they've been doing. And I was known as a Pied Piper of realism in the Winter Park Sidewalk Arts Festival. And that's how my classes filled up at the Orlando Art Museum. And I was teaching one day during the week to the adult class, and this gentleman walked up to me, very distinguished looking. He was one of my students in the class. And he said, instead of teaching your class next week, how would you like to meet Albin Polasek in his studio, the whole class? And I said, wow! I was young, quite young then, and really interested in how artists made a living throughout their lives. So I was extremely interested in meeting him. So we all met here, and my memory of this room was mellow. It was oak panel back then.
Oh gosh.
Like the architecture of the olden days. And when he came in, we were all seated around, and when he came in, I thought one of his sculptures had come to life. And sadly, he had a sprained arm. And for a sculptor with a sprained arm, that's disastrous.
Was that after his stroke?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know how he feels now. He was in his 80s when that happened. And here I am with the shoes on the other feet. I'm in 93 now.
Wow.
And I can feel what he was thinking. He had all surrounded by all his work and his accomplishments. And when he started to talk and told of all the places that he'd been commissioned to do sculpture, I wish I could have remembered more of them. The thing I do remember is the nativity scene that he had done in Europe. And I always associated that with his ticket to commissions in the United States.
Exactly.
Because it was so impressive that people would have the confidence to hire him. And Byron said he was at the Art Institute in Chicago, and I hadn't realized that because I was born in Centralia, Illinois, so that's my home state.
Well, you're closer than you thought.
Yeah, a lot more in common there.
That's awesome. Yeah, he spent 30 years there before he came to Winter Park.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But his story just stayed with me so much, and I have a very vivid memory of visual things. Some things I won't even look at because I don't want them in my mind. But I do remember him in this room that was what I call so mellow. It was wood panel, and I've since then been to several doctor's offices that have been remodeled. And I always liked them better the way they were. And that's the way this room was as he moved around and talked to us. So I taught at the Orlando Art Museum from 1958 to 1968. And Byron, you said he died at 65?
65, yeah.
So I probably met him when I was around 33. And I taught at the Art Center until 68. And I was teaching all day at Edgewater,
Yeah.
and then 2 nights a week at the Art Center. And it was beginning to burn me out. And then the county offered me the job. It was the age of Sputnik. They had created a summer program for science and chemistry to catch up with the Russians. And it was so successful, they decided to, after a couple of years, to include art and drama. And they asked me to teach it.
That's awesome.
And it would make up for what I was making down at the Arts Center, but give me some rest time
There you go.
in between. And so I started teaching the summer enrichment program out of Winter Park High. So I was beginning to feel like I was from Winter Park.
There you go.
And I always remember when I drove by the museum, I looked over here and I remembered how mellow that night was.
Yeah.
And it always gave me a lift to look over here and remember this talk.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, Mr. Polasek was also very enthralled with the space program that we were entering at the time before his death. And we actually have a sculpture here on property that's called Man Reaching for the Moon. And that was done before we actually went into successful space travel. But he was very enthralled by it and was excited about it. Too bad he didn't get to actually see it. But what were some of the other things that he might have touched on that night to the adult students?
Well, the main thing were the different places all around the country. I'd have to go back and read his books.
Yeah.
To remember where they were. That's why the Art Institute was a surprise to me.
Yeah, yeah. I actually had the good fortune to visit there last summer, and it was quite a beautiful place. I look forward to going back to Chicago. So, well, is there anything else that stood out about this place, and have you seen it change over the years and your visits back here? I know you've come here a time or two to see my work, actually.
Yes,
And,
I've been to those exhibits and kept track of the museum as it grew.
Yeah.
And Mellow's the best word I could use.
That's a good one.
The feeling that I had of being associated, and especially in meeting him, because the stories he told were
He lived them.
real stories
Yeah.
that he had experienced. So I felt very fortunate, and the whole class did.
Now, did you get to meet him more than once, or was
Just
it
that one
just
time.
that one time?
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool, and I can tell it's made a nice effect on your life and remembering. And I was thinking and preparing to ask you a few things. You had a lot in common with him. You know, you both had settled in this area, and you both were longtime educators. And a few years ago, how I became aware of the story that Mr. Bischoff has just told us in this very room. I was having a bust sculpted of me in an exhibition with Peter Forrester, and you and your lovely wife Melanie attended that day. And I remember in breaks whenever Peter needed to look at me for whatever the reason, and then I would come over and chat with you, and you told me this great little story we just talked about here this morning. And I've thought about it many times, actually, because having an association now for 9 years with the museum, and before that I was a volunteer as well. So it definitely has affected my life in a very positive way, and I'm very thankful for my connection here. And likewise with you, Mr. Bischoff, you've definitely gave me some encouraging words over the years, and I think that we became closer after I was out of high school, and I really appreciate that. So, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Well, former students are very uplifting for me, and you are one of them.
Well, I appreciate that. My dad was an educator as well, and we would be sitting over at Gabriel's or something, the sub shop there next to the school in the summer, and having a sandwich, and someone would come in and see my dad and tell them about the bookshelf they made their mom in 8th grade or something, you know, and I still have the artwork that I made in your class, and it's just been a really wonderful association with you throughout my life and with both of us in this place.
Were you class of '83?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I want to thank you for your time this morning and coming out, and just keep coming on. You're always welcome.
Thanks for the memories revisiting.
Thank you. That's all. Thanks a lot.
So before I hit stop on everything,
Okay.
this will just be for our archival records. If we post anything, it'll be Byron's portion. Mr. Bischoff, I should say, this is Emily. I'm the curator, just for the audio. Did you meet Emily Polasek that night? I can take this.
Did you meet his wife Emily that night?
No.
No. Okay. Yeah.
Was there green carpet everywhere?
Was there green carpet everywhere?
All I remember is the paneling.
That's awesome. That's
And the
awesome.
warmth in the room, because he acted like he genuinely appreciated us being there.
Yeah.
To tell that his work was done, but his life story was still very important to him.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Did he have, so now when you look around, everything is placed specifically so people don't trip over it. But do you know that night we have pictures of him just surrounded by easels and art? Was it kind of, do you remember, was it like that? Did he just have art everywhere?
Was the studio kind of in chaos, or was it kind of well laid out like what we have it here?
It was kind of in chaos.
I can relate.
That's like why he looked like a piece of sculpture walking around.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool. Did he take you guys out to the garden when you visited?
Did you walk throughout the property, or would you pretty much right here in the studio?
It was in the evening, so it was pretty much here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the entrance, there were statues,
Yeah.
sculptures that he had done.
That's awesome.
The first impression is always overwhelming.
Yep. I can relate to that. I can definitely relate to that, so. Well, do you have anything else, Emily?
One more.
Okay.
So, I've heard stories that the house always smelled like sauerkraut.
Did you notice if the house or the studio that night smelled like sauerkraut?
No.
We spoke with
The
a
German effect or European?
Czechoslovakia.
Czechoslovakia.
Yeah. A past artist that knew him opened up a box one day of sculpting clay, and she took a big whiff of it, and she said, "It still smells like sauerkraut." She goes, "He ate sauerkraut every day."
Wow.
And after visiting the Czech Republic myself a few years ago, I could tell them. It's on every menu. Yeah.
That's all I've got.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Bischoff, again, and we really appreciate this. And now you're going to have a lasting impression on this museum as well with this wonderful interview you've allowed us to partake in today.
Thank you, Byron.
All right.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.